The guard said it like he'd been waiting all morning to feel important. I had just turned off the paved subdivision street and onto the dirt road leading to my ranch when two black security trucks blocked the entrance. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes arrogance is so stupid your brain needs a second to catch up. 3 months earlier, I had legally bought the ranch at the end of that road. The deed was in my glove box. The recorded easement was in a folder on the passenger seat, and now a guard in dark sunglasses was telling me the HOA owned the road now. Behind him stood a brand new steel gate, fresh concrete posts, electronic keypad, shiny sign across the bars. Private road HOA controlled access. This road goes to my property, I said. Not anymore. That was when the whole thing stopped being annoying and started being expensive for them, because before I bought that ranch, I spent 6 years working in land use litigation. Easements, zoning fights, access disputes, developers pushing too far, that was my day job. So I didn't argue. I pulled out my phone and started recording. They had just turned a power trip into evidence. I'm 32, and after years of helping other people defend land, I finally saved enough to buy some of my own. I didn't want a suburban lot. I wanted open land, real quiet, something honest. I found it just outside a fast-growing Texas town, 40 neglected acres, with a leaning barn, broken fence lines, waist-high grass, and an old windmill one storm away from retirement. The access road crossed through a newer HOA subdivision, the kind with stone entrance signs, perfect lawns, and people who treat property values like scripture. But the legal side was clean. Clear Title County Survey recorded access easement that predated the subdivision by decades. The developer built around that easement. That mattered. The first few weekends out there felt like the beginning of a different life. I'd pass the sprinklers, ticking over those manicured lawns, hit the gravel, and breathe easier the second the pavement ended. At the ranch, I started with fencing brush clearing in the old trough by the barn. When I got water running again, it sounded like the place was waking up. They watched from sidewalks, SUVs, and kitchen windows. To them, the ranch had always been scenery, something rustic to look at from a safe distance. Then I showed up with a truck, tools, and plans. Suddenly, the scenery had an owner. I met Elaine Foster on a hot Saturday while I was repairing the western fence line. White SUV pressed jeans, expensive sunglasses, smile that never reached her eyes. She introduced herself as HOA president and told me very politely that the road was HOA maintained and they expected cooperation from neighboring property owners. I told her the access easement was recorded with the county. She smiled wider. That can change. Then she drove off like she'd settled something. 10 days later, I came back from a work trip and found the gate. Not a chain, not a warning sign. A full steel barrier sunk into fresh concrete with cameras mounted near the entrance and private security standing there like I was a threat instead of the legal owner of the property beyond it. I showed them the easement. They refused to read it. I asked who authorized the gate. They told me to call the board. That was the moment I felt the useful kind of anger, the kind that makes you document everything instead of yell. I photographed the hinges, lock sign posts, trucks, guards, everything. Then I went home, spread every document across my dining table, and started building a file. While I did that, the HOA started pressing from every direction. Certified letters showed up claiming I owed fees, security costs, and daily fines. One notice said any agricultural activity on my property required HOA approval for community compatibility, which was rich considering their gate was the reason I couldn't even reach the property. Rumors spread, too, that I was bringing in commercial livestock, heavy equipment, noise, traffic trouble. That's the thing about people who want control. If they can't legally take your rights, they'll try to isolate you instead. For a few nights, I barely slept. I kept reading. Easement language, county plats, board summaries, subdivision filings. Every page told the same story. The access easement had been recorded 25 years before the subdivision existed. The board had no power to revoke it, vote it away, or block it. Then I found the piece that changed everything. Buried in the HOA records was a board-approved expense labeled Security Infrastructure and Road Access Control. I cross-referenced it with the financial disclosures. Elaine and the board had authorized nearly $48,000 in community funds for the gate and a private security contract. No member vote, no legal opinion, no court order. Just a handful of people spending the neighborhood's money on a legal bluff. That was the twist. They weren't just bullying me, they were gambling with their own residents' dues to do it. I hired a local attorney, the quiet kind. He read the easement records, the photos the board's spending, and said they blocked deeded access tied to a recorded easement. That's not a misunderstanding, that's obstruction. He sent the first demand letter that afternoon. Remove the gate stop, interfering preserve records. They ignored it. He sent a second. They ignored that too. So we stopped asking. 3 mornings later, I met a sheriff's deputy at the subdivision entrance. When we pulled up to the gate together, the security guard's posture changed fast. Within minutes, Elaine arrived with 2 board members, all of them looking polished and irritated. The deputy was calm. He asked who authorized the gate. Elaine said the HOA had authority over roadway access inside subdivision boundaries. He asked whether they had documentation revoking the easement. She hesitated. I handed him the certified copies. He read them, checked the plat map, checked the dates. Wind moved through the grass. One of the cameras clicked faintly as it tracked. Nobody said a word. Then he looked up and said, "This easement predates your subdivision. You cannot block this road." Elaine tried one last time. The association voted to restrict non-resident traffic to protect property values. He didn't blink. An HOA vote does not override county recorded access rights. Open the gate. That was it. No shouting, no dramatic speech, just reality walking into fantasy and shutting it down. The keypad beeped, the lock clicked, and the steel gate rolled back inch by inch. I drove through without saying a word. But that wasn't the best part. 2 days later, with help from a homeowner inside the subdivision, a retired accountant named Martin, we got the fuller financial records. Martin became the surprise ally nobody saw coming. He requested documents the board hoped nobody would actually read. Once the numbers got out, the mood inside that neat little neighborhood changed fast. $48,000 will do that. The next board meeting was packed. People wanted to know why their dues funded guards' cameras and a gate built to block a lawful easement. They wanted to know where the legal review was, why nobody voted, and whether the HOA's insurance was about to get dragged into a lawsuit. Then the county got involved. My attorney filed everything: easement records, photos, demand letters, board expenditures. The county confirmed the easement was valid, perpetual, and enforceable. Then they started asking the question that really mattered. Why had board members spent association money on an action outside their legal authority? After that, the unraveling came quick. The security trucks disappeared first, then the cameras came down. A week later, contractors showed up with torches and cut the gate free from the posts, while residents watched from sidewalks and driveways. 2 board members resigned that same week. Another quit the morning after. Elaine tried to hold on, said everything had been done in good faith to protect the community. My settlement came quietly: reimbursement for attorney fees, documented losses, and a written agreement recognizing the easement without condition going forward. No future restrictions without a court order. A certified check arrived in the mail a few days later. And I won't lie, that felt good. Not because of the money, but because it put their mistake in writing. They were wrong, and they had to pay for being wrong. Elaine resigned not long after. No apology, of course. Just one of those polished statements about acting in the best interest of the community. What stayed with me most came later. Once the gate was gone, some of the same neighbors who'd watched me like I was trouble started coming over. A woman near the entrance apologized and admitted they'd been told I was planning commercial operations. Martin came out one Saturday to help me reset fence posts, and before noon a couple of others joined in. Turns out community can show up in strange clothes once fear gets out of the driver's seat. By late summer, the windmill was turning again, the trough was full, and I brought in a small herd of cattle, just enough to put the pasture back to work. Some evenings I'd sit on the tailgate and watch them move through that golden grass while the sun dropped behind the oaks and the whole place would go quiet in that deep, earned way. That's when the lesson finally settled in. A lot of people think power belongs to whoever has the title, the badge, the microphone, the keypad, the polished smile at the meeting. But real power is usually quieter than that. It lives in paperwork, patience, facts, and the refusal to surrender what is yours just because somebody confident told you to. Greed rarely shows up looking greedy. Most times it shows up sounding reasonable. It talks about standards, harmony, protection, values, all while reaching for something that isn't its own. And if you don't know your rights, the people hurting you will call it order. So no, I didn't fight because I wanted revenge. I fought because the land was mine. The law was clear, and letting them get away with it would have meant admitting that confidence matters more than truth. It doesn't. Not forever. Now, when I turn onto that dirt road, there's no gate, no cameras, no guards, Just gravel under the tires, wind in the grass, and 40 acres waiting at the end like they always were. And every time I drive through, I get the same quiet little satisfaction. Because the road is open, the boundary is real, and karma every now and then still knows the address. So let me ask you this. When somebody hides behind rules, titles, or community standards to take what isn't theirs, where's the line between enforcement and abuse? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anybody else who thought authority gave them ownership, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear where you think the line is and whether justice won because of the law or because somebody finally refused to back down.